gamers? Power Word Heal here, and today we're going to be talking about the Diamond Flask. So this is kind of a topic that is coming up now because Phase 3 is in the game, which is where you can get Diamond Flask, and I kind of wanted to just talk about my thoughts about it as a healer, what I think of people making Diamond Flask sets, and then I wanted to also talk about how useful it is, practically speaking, and then finally kind of like how to make a set easily, right? So what is Diamond Flask, first of all? Well, Diamond Flask is a trinket that a warrior has. Let me see, I might actually be able to put it on right here, if we can find it here. Diamond Flask, right? And basically you use it, it lasts 60 seconds, and it ticks every 5 seconds, right? And it gives you the 75 strength, but then it also heals you. Now, the healing component, like a lot of things in this game, has a coefficient attached to it, right? And it basically has a 100% healing coefficient. So that means any plus healing you put in actually gets, directly sent to the flask. So if you have like 900 healing, it sends 900 healing to the flask. Now, the way it works is a little bit different from a typical spell. And this is why, in my opinion, it absolutely is bugged. But Agron has come out and said before that it is not bugged, but that is just not, like, there's no way it's intended to work like this. You know what I mean? I think this is just a cope from them that they don't want to bother to fix it, or they know a lot of people like it, obviously, because a ton of people play Warrior, and they want the class to be, like, as OP as possible, so they want this to stay in the game. It's definitely not supposed to work like this, because typically what happens with any spell where you have a coefficient, right, that's a hot, is the value is applied over the entire duration of the hot, right? So what would happen here is if you had a Diamond Flask set, right, where you had, let's say, 900 plus healing, you would get 900 healing over the duration of the 12 ticks that occur within 60 seconds. Now, how it actually works is that you get the 900 healing for every tick, right? So you basically get, like, it's actually 1200% coefficient, you could think of it as, with your plus healing in terms of the total healing value. So it actually does heal quite a bit, right? And realistically, what this does is it just opens up more options for warriors to, like, solo things, right? They can solo elites easier. I think some people are saying they can solo DM East runs with this, depending on the amount of plus healing they get and stuff like that, and if they're geared enough. So it just makes it easier to do things out in the open world. It has some applications for PvP as well. Now, obviously, the thing you have to keep in mind is that you don't want to be using the actual Diamond Flask set, right, when you're doing these activities. So you want to have the set, and then what you do is you use the Diamond Flask, and then you can swap the gear before you get into combat. And what that does is it basically just, it's called a snapshotting in this game, where because you had the healing on when you used the flask, that's the value it's looking at, and it's still giving you the healing on every tick. You don't need the actual gear to be on in order to get the healing on every tick, right? So that makes it useful in the PvE content, and it can potentially give it uses in PvP if you use it at the right time, right? Like if you know you're going to be opened on, or if you know you're going to get into a fight with something. So there's definitely, like, use cases for it there, and obviously it's very annoying. Now, personally, I think that this should be nerfed into the ground. I'm fine with it having the coefficient, but it should be it should be 900 healing, or whatever the amount you get, right, over the duration of the flask. And I'm mostly fine with the snapshotting staying. I think ultimately, like, although snapshotting is kind of like considered to be a skill expressive mechanic, in this particular version of the game, it's not really very, very skill expressive for the most part, and it kind of just allows stuff like this to thrive, if that makes sense. So I'm not really a big fan of snapshotting in this particular version of the game. And I think overall, just like in terms of cohesion for how things work, it's not a very good system to have, because it's kind of unintuitive for new players. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's unintuitive, but it's something that they wouldn't necessarily think about right off the rip. And I don't really think that mechanics like that should really be included in order to boost people's damage. So I'm kind of more in the camp of get rid of it. But, I kind of understand, like, why they keep it, obviously. But it should definitely be nerfed in terms of not giving the value per tick. It should obviously just give the value over the duration. Something is clearly wrong there, and they just don't want to bother fixing it, obviously, right? So that is basically how it works, right? And like I said, you can use it for PvE. When you're soloing stuff, you can use it for PvP. But the main thing I kind of wanted to talk about is people tend to make this argument, and really they're making an argument to justify taking the gear, right? And they talk about its use in a raid, and they talk about how it's like fantastic, because it's just like so much healing and so much threat, and it's like imperative to have on the tank. And the irony, in my opinion, is that outside of very specific fights, like maybe Sapphiron or something like that, it's just not very useful in most cases. I would say even on normal DPS warriors, if they are trying to, like snapshot the buff for themselves. But on tanks especially, it's just not really that great. And I've kind of like argued this point before, and people have been like, well, what do you mean? It's like let's say you get like really good bisque gear on it, it's like 1,000 healing on the tank, right? I've had actually people make arguments to me that like, well, technically, since healer gear doesn't really benefit healers that much, it might actually be better on the tank and their flask set. And it's just like, it's just a crazy level of delusion. I'll explain why. So basically, this works like any other hop, but it's like worse because it ticks in 5-second intervals. So it's like even like the odds that it's going to actually tick in the right spot are terrible because it's not even getting the same amount of ticks as like another hot, right? Theoretically, it's probably got similar ticks to Rejuve, but you can keep Rejuve active all the time. So if you were to take the amount of ticks over a minute, you would have more on Rejuve and Regrowth, right? So the tick rate is not great. But the problem with using it on the tank, really, is that the tank should be the magnet for basically all heals in the guild, especially in these early phases, but even in the later phases, to be honest, there's realistically just not that much raid damage that goes out. And when it does go out, it's kind of like about it, it gets healed back really quickly, and then everybody's back on the tank again. So the tank should realistically be getting just like bombed with either incoming heals that actually are coming in and overhealing him, heals that are just healing his health if he's actually taking damage, or heals that are being started on him and then canceled at the last second and then restarted. So he should always have basically tons of incoming healing in. And what that means is that, like, typically when people make an argument for Diamond Flask set, they'll look into the logs, right? Because the logs are like the white paper of World of Warcraft. It's like, oh, the logs, look at the logs, guys. The logs say this, the logs give me this data. It must be good, right? Look, I'm getting an effect from the logs. But, like, in reality, like, what the log is telling you, right, is that the Flask probably does, like, 40% overhealing or something like that. I've seen some people say that. I haven't actually looked to check. Some people say it does, like, 60%. The truth is, it doesn't really matter what amount of overhealing it's doing, right? Because what they're trying to say is, like, oh, well, even if it does 60% overhealing, 40% of the time, you're getting a huge heal. That's helping the healers out. And it's like, well, no, not at all, because I'm never be able to, like, heal you based on the tick of this Diamond Flask, because we don't even know, like, when it's ticking, right? Like, that's not going to be a thing that's ever going to be happening when you're tanking trash and tanking bosses and you're going from one thing to, like, we're not lining up the ticks here, right? And then on top of that, like, even if we tried to line up the ticks, like, we don't want to let you have minus 1,000 health at any given point, right? Because you can die from that. You can die from that very easily, actually. Things in this game do a lot of damage, and warriors don't tank them with the proper gear set, and that's intentional, right, to increase the raid threat per second. But that comes with the consequence of sometimes they actually get hit really, really hard. And realistically, you don't want the tank's health to be, like, lower than max for basically any significant period of time. How the tank's health usually goes is it's like, it doesn't go from 90 to 80 to 70 to 60. I've talked about this in another video. But it goes from basically like 90 to 70, back to 100, down to 50, up to 85. It just like spikes all over the place, basically. And most of the time, it's capping back at 100. And there's a surplus of heals on the tank, right? And most people are just letting their heals go through. So they're like, it's actual wasted overhealing, right? And in the case of the Diamond Flask here, basically what's happening is any value that it does heal, right, most of the time is actually just causing your healers now to do overheal with the heal they casted, right? And that heal was coming in anyway. It's not like you're preventing that heal by the Diamond Flask having healed, is the problem, right? So realistically, it changes nothing about how the healing is done in like 99% of cases. Now, obviously, there's certain cases, right? We mentioned Saffron and in other cases where, maybe it's more effective than we're kind of giving it credit for here because there's not going to be adequate healing on the tank or adequate healing on the target, right? So there is that. Of course, there is a limitation that typically this has to be done at the start of the fight because obviously you don't want to start the fight with your Flask set gear on. That's bad. You need to use it, snapshot it, then swap to your actual gear, and then start the fight. So there's an inherent limitation there as well. You can't necessarily bust this out at like a critical part of the fight, right? So that's another problem. But yeah, it's just the idea that somehow this is helping the healers is just not really the case outside of those very niche scenarios or outside of a scenario where people are like legitimately completely right? And usually that's happening at the end of the fight, so that's not going to be the scenario where this is happening. You know what I mean? Usually, obviously, like this is being used and popped early into the fight, which is when people have a surplus of mana and there's going to be a surplus of heals in the tank. And yeah, it's just, there's basically almost no chance that it's going to have a significant impact. Now, it actually tends to have, it'll have more of an impact, in my opinion, on like a DPS type warrior because they're more likely to take such a small amount of damage maybe early on from just something. There's tons of things that cause like small amounts of miscellaneous raid damage. And, instead of somebody starting to cast a heal on them, maybe it happens to tick at the right time and they go back to like 100%. And at that point, nobody's casting on them to overheal, right? So at that point, it did real effective healing. It actually redirected a heal that would have went on that person to the tank probably, which is good. So there are situations where, in raid it can be useful, but it's more going to be on a DPS really than a tank, right? I think a lot of the reasons why people think tank is because there's not a ton of fights where the DPS are taking damage like early for the Diamond Flask to really matter, and that's a fair point. But I guess my point is just that although the tank has more opportunities probably to make use of the buff on a wider variety of fights, right? Considering they're always going to be taking damage from the start of the fight, so the tick should at least have the potential to do something. Since they are being bombed anyway, that is completely irrelevant, right? And even though it has a way less chance of doing something on a DPS warrior who's not taking direct damage, if it actually does tick on the DPS warrior at the right time, it can legitimately save a heal, right? So, again, it's actually most of the time better on a DPS warrior than it would be on an actual tank in terms of like changing your raid. Okay. And yeah, I think that's basically it for the explanation of how it works and stuff. And now I kind of just wanted to talk about, getting the set and really what I think about like tanks or, just DPS rolling on the set in general. So there's kind of like a tier list here. I probably should have put it in a notepad, but I'll try and do it off the top of my head. So basically the tier 1 is that like, if you're trying to make the argument that you should have this as a tank, like over a healer in any situation where loot priority should be equal, right? Like where you're, not running the dungeon for somebody else or, like you still need things from a dungeon. Like if you're basically dungeoning normally as a tank, right, to get gear for yourself, and you're not explicitly going in with the purpose of getting the Diamond Flask pieces, and you're explicitly making it known that you're going in to get those Diamond Flask pieces, then taking healer gear while you're trying to actually gear yourself normally is just complete brain rot, right? That should actually be like a bannable offense, in my opinion. It's basically like the most absurd thing I've ever heard of in my life. So that's like kind of like tier 1, right? But then there's like going down from that, it's like, if you already have everything you need and you're doing the dungeon for the explicit purpose of getting the items, then you wouldn't be doing the dungeon if you didn't need the healing items, right? So at that point, you're kind of setting up a group and you just make everybody aware that you are taking the healing items or you're rolling on them. And then if people want to come, they want to come. If they don't, they don't. not really much to say about that, right? That's pretty fine, I would say. Um, but in any situation where you should have like equal loot prio on something, then and it wasn't discussed beforehand, it's kind of insane to take a healing item over a healer on a warrior. For I would say just the fact that the item is way more generally useful on the healer is one aspect, but it's not even just that, because the problem is you have very viable replacements in basically all your slots, right? That you can buy from the auction house, you can get from vendors, stuff like that, right? The healer in a lot of cases, because they need more than just the plus healing, um, really does need some of those actual Priebus items. And people will say, well, oh, healers use green Priebus items all the time. It's like, well, they use them to fill in slots. And personally, I should make a video about that. It's kind of a bit dated now, but I actually don't even like doing that on most classes. I think on maybe a class like Druid, it could be okay. I think even on Shaman, a class that likes plus healing, it's not really acceptable most of the time, because your mana pool would just be so bad, right? If you used only green plus healing items, that it's just kind of not tenable at a certain point. Maybe if you're like hyper consuming with the flask, it's more possible. But yeah. So you're basically, you can get easier options as the warrior that needs the flask set healing item, right? And you're just foregoing those and taking the option that is holistically good from the healer, and they use all the other stats on it away from them. And I'll kind of go through each slot here and talk about some of the craziest grievances here. But yeah, that's pretty much my philosophy on it, is that if you're going to take this stuff as a warrior, like healing gear, you want to make the group and make it explicit that you are going to be either rolling or you're going to be taking it yourself. You know what I mean? And then obviously if somebody comes at that point, then it's on them. But I've even seen, there's like another tier, we should actually put this as like Z tier or X tier, where people are making arguments that healing gear from the raid, like the living shoulders or whatever from, what do you call it, Major Domo or whatever, that's not what they're called, but you guys know what I'm talking about, the 60 healing shoulders, that like stuff like that should go to the tank over like shamans and druids because of Flask set, which is like, and I mean, a lot of people that would make that argument are probably trolling, but I've actually heard this made like unironically, which is just like obviously Z tier brain rot, right? Like somebody who says something like that should be like IP banned from the game realistically. But yeah, if they actually believe it, I mean. So coming to the list, right? The idea here was we're going to put together a list of like everything that you can get that doesn't require being in a 5-man and taking it from somebody else to make your healing set, and we'll kind of talk about the options here. So this is like very easy to get. It's, you just buy it off the auction house. There's an equivalent engineering items, and most warriors are going to be engineering, right? Especially if they're trying to min-max. So they can just buy the engineering version. It actually has more healing, so it's even better than this. It's not in here, though. I think I have to go to random suffixes. Yeah, it's still not here. Yeah, maybe it just doesn't take into account the other items. But so just use the Cassandra's or the engineering item, and you shouldn't be rolling for head slots ever. It's pretty much the best head slot anyway of these things, right? It's the actual Abyss. Now the amulet, a lot of people will roll on the animated chain. Obviously, if you've set up a group like I said before, and that's kosher, that's fine. But this is a really easy alternative amulet to get that is about just as good, and you can just buy it from Dark Moon Fair when the Dark Moon Fair comes around, using widgets or whatever is the cheapest convert to Dark Moon Fair currency that you can find. So this is an option. You have Dawnbringer shoulders. I think these are out. If these aren't out, the living shoulders are out, which are basically the same thing, right? Just a little bit worse. Oh, some wild growth spalders. That's the thing I was thinking of, yeah. But yeah, I mean, if you're trying to make an argument that you should get this over, an actual healer when this is in the game and this is in the game, then I mean, even if they weren't in the game, it wouldn't matter. But like, it's just extra brain rot, right? Unless obviously nobody else needs these. So there's that. The cloak, you can just get like a 30 healing cloak. You can obviously get High to the Wild. It's come down probably quite a bit in price by now, but it's still probably going to be more expensive than the 30-some healing cloak, so it's kind of just up to you there. Cloak is a slot that a lot of healers tend to have, so if you're running with a healer who happens to have like a good cloak in the slot, you can easily get Cloak of the Cosmos from DM West, right? Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory there. Then this, you should pretty much never be getting Robes of the Exalted unless obviously they drop for you and nobody else needs them. But like realistically, you should just you should just buy the Red Dragon Scale Breastplate because this is like super easy. You don't have to do strat. I don't even think it's that expensive. It might be more expensive now a little bit because, you know, it's 2025. People are more in tune to things like the Flask set, but it shouldn't really be that bad overall, I don't think. Coming down to the bracers, let's see. So you just use the standard plus healing bracers. You enchant them with plus 24 healing. Not really much to see here. You can obviously use the Warsong bracers. You know, if you are exalted with Warsong Gulch, but a lot of people that's not going to be the case. So yeah, you can also get some of these bracers pretty easily. Like if you're on Horde, I think these still drop on Horde, and obviously they're pretty good. So you can pick these up, and no other class can use them. Obviously, if you're Alliance and you have a Paladin in the group that needs them, I would give them to the Paladin, but this is like a decent source. So Dire Maul has a lot of bracers as well. But yeah, you can pretty much just get one from the vendor. Now, a lot of people look here and they're like, oh, we need Hammer of Grace, right? And, you know, Hammer of Grace is technically the best option you're going to get before, like, the rank 14 stuff. And before stuff you're just realistically not going to have the chance to get, like Locomir and stuff like that. However, I think it's easy to just get like a lesser healing dagger here. Like you can get one that's like 20 healing and then just slap plus 55 healing on it. You're mostly getting a weapon that's a one hand, so you can put plus healing on it, and so you can use the AV offhand and the offhand, right? And this is your best combination. So again, this can be gotten really easily just from the auction house. Gloves, again, the best thing you're going to get here is, you know, a vendor gloves. It's going to be really easy to get the gloves from DM East because it's just so easy to run, right? That even if you're running it with a healer, they're probably going to get their gloves eventually. If you're running it with a priest, they can't even use the gloves. So DM East gloves are the gloves that you should be targeting if you don't want to buy gloves from the auction house because, you know, you're just not going to do collateral damage there. They're so easy to get. You can just wait for somebody else to get them. They drop all the time. Now, the healing sash, you have a couple options here. You can go Corehound Belt and Sash of Mercy. Those are obviously quite expensive. Whipvine Cord is another fantastic option here from DM East, right? It's just really easy to get, so you don't have to, like, really worry about taking this over somebody because you can just run with them once they get it, right? Then you get the next one or something like that. It should be really easy to get. And if you don't even want to bother, you can just buy a better healing sash from the auction house, but it might be a little bit expensive. So the pants, these are interesting in my opinion because in this slot, these are just like by far the best that you're going to get outside the empowered leggings, which you're just not going to get basically for a while. You can also buy these. These are kind of rare though, right? Taking something like Padres trousers here, don't ever do that. I would even say, even for the senior design pantaloons, but don't ever take these items, especially this item. This is like a crazy item for a healer. Like if you take this item from a healer for your Flask set, when you can like literally buy a pair that has more healing, and you can buy the pair with the same equiv healing that for super cheap, you are just a terrorist. Like literally, you should be banned from the game. Just absolute insanity. And I'm sure it'll happen. I'm sure people will try and do it because, you know, like warrior brain, just absolutely insane. So yeah, there's that. Now boots, let's see here. So basically you're getting healing boots from the auction house, and you know, these are pretty easy to get for the most part, I would say, from Undead Strat, because not a lot of people use them or prefer them. They want some stats on the boots. I mean, you can get some of this anyway, right? But realistically, I think like if you run strat with even a semi-consistent group and you get these to drop like once for the healer that needs them, you can just take the next pair. Another great situation, or another great pair of boots, is the water spout boots, because again, it's just like really easy access to these most of the time. To be fair on these, like the access isn't that great if you were going in to try and like farm them, because they are from a rare spawn. But what I mean, I guess, is that a lot of times the healer is not actually going to want these, I feel like. They might, I guess, if they're shaman druid. But like realistically, a lot of people are probably just going to get the water sprout boots. And getting the water sprout boots is very easy because you can just spam run DM, right? So if you don't want to pay for the boots from the vendor, you can get those. The rings is where it starts to get hard. You're probably not going to have Forging Seal because you already did the other quest, right? You can obviously get Rose Wine somewhat easily if you can find groups doing the three boss kill, but the problem is that obviously the healer there is probably going to need the ring. So yeah, you just don't really want to take it from him in most cases. You have Maiden Circlet, that's like really expensive in a lot of cases. I think Emerald Flame Rings are quite good. This Advisored Ring from Warsong is quite good and not really that hard to get. So there's options there, right? And I put Band of the Unicorn. Like you can buy these like really quick off the auction house, and they basically do the job. They're not as good as the other rings, obviously. You are losing out on a bit of plus healing here, but it kind of is what it is, right? Then, so you need to have the flask equipped, right, to use you need to have this equipped to snapshot. So you can only use one trinket, I believe, when you're using the flask. And I've actually seen people roll on Briarwood Reed, which is just absolute insanity to me. This got linked to me today, and I wanted to like actually jump to the computer and like strangle these people because, yeah, it's just absolutely deranged players rolling on Briarwood Reed. Like realistically, you should just not use this, or you should just not go for the other trinket in most cases. But the easy one to get if you really want a trinket is the second wind trinket, right? Because you can just do these runs for the Golem Lord and stuff, and the healer will maybe stay for a little bit if you get them theirs, right, to hopefully get you another one or something like that. Or, it's just like, it's in the run. If you're running Hodge anyway, it's very close, at least right now, where the Hodge is placed in the instance. So taking the extra time to go and kill this boss for this is not really that hard. And, hopefully somebody can do that for you. But do not take Briarwood Reed unless nobody else needs it. Obviously, that's just insane. Especially taking Briarwood Reed from like damage casters is like absolutely ridiculous. You know what I mean? So definitely don't do that. And that is basically the whole thing. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below, and I'll reply to them. Just if this has helped you at all, like, comment, and subscribe. Probably gonna get a lot of hate for this one, honestly, because there's gonna be some salty warriors in here. But I don't think anything I said was like super unreasonable. So yeah, just let me know what you guys think, and I will talk to you next time.